In a far corner of the galaxy, there was a city built on stone and metal, a place where light from twin suns never reached the ground because tall alien towers covered the sky. In this city, humans were not free. They were the lowest class, treated like animals, sold and bought in the markets, beaten for mistakes, and silenced when they cried. Among these humans was a young woman, her skin pale from lack of sunlight, her eyes tired but still burning with something no one could take away. Hope. She had no name, because her alien master never gave her one. He only called her personal slave, as if she was not a person but a thing. Every morning she woke before the suns rose. She cleaned, she cooked, she served, and she endured. Her body carried scars, and her voice was always quiet. Yet in her silence, there was a hidden fire. She dreamed of freedom. She dreamed of walking outside without chains. She dreamed of being called by a name that belonged only to her. But in this cruel city, dreams were dangerous because dreams made slaves rebel, and rebellion was punished with death. So she kept her dreams locked inside her heart. The alien master was a cruel being, tall and heavy, with skin like stone and eyes like burning coal. He enjoyed reminding her that she was nothing. He laughed when she winced, and he smiled when she cried. One day, the master grew bored, and like many of his kind, he decided to sell her at the market. For him, she was just another item, another piece of property to trade for money. The market was loud, filled with the cries of humans in chains. Alien merchants shouted prices, buyers mocked the weak, and laughter echoed in every corner. She stood on a wooden platform, her wrists bound, her head lowered. The auctioneer shouted her price. Aliens offered coins, and some laughed, saying she was not even worth the rope tied to her hands. Her heart sank. She thought this was the end. One master would sell her, another would buy her, and the chains would never break. But then, in the crowd, there was a man, different from the rest. He was not tall, not strong, and not rich. His clothes were worn, his hands rough from labor, his eyes tired, but his gaze was steady. He saw her, not as property, not as trash, but as a human. The auctioneer mocked him. "Do you want this broken thing, human? You cannot even feed yourself. How will you feed a slave?" The crowd laughed. Cruel voices filled the air. The man reached into his pocket. His hand shook because he had only one coin left, his last coin, the only thing standing between him and hunger. But still, he lifted it high, his voice firm. "I will buy her." The auctioneer stared, shocked, then burst into laughter. "You are a fool. You spend your last coin for this useless girl. What will you do now? Beg for food with her by your side?" The crowd roared with laughter, but the man did not move. He walked forward, placed the coin in the auctioneer's hand, and said only one thing. "She is not useless. She is human." The alien laughed again, but greed was stronger than pride. He took the coin and threw the girl toward the man. "She is yours now, fool. May you starve together." The girl stumbled, falling into the man's arms. For a moment she was frozen. She could not believe what had happened. No one had ever chosen her. No one had ever looked at her and said she mattered. The chains around her wrists were unlocked. The metal fell to the ground with a heavy sound. She touched her hands, free for the first time in her life. Her eyes lifted to the man, and in his face, she saw no cruelty, no mockery, only kindness, and something deeper, respect. He looked at her and spoke softly. "You are free now. You will never be a slave again." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from something she had forgotten long ago. Hope. The crowd still laughed, pointing at them as they walked away. Some whispered that they would not survive the night, that the man had wasted his life. But as they disappeared into the shadows of the city, something new began to rise inside her heart. A question, a spark, a dangerous dream. Why did this man spend his last coin for her? Why did he, a stranger, see her as more than a slave? She did not know the answer yet, but deep inside, she felt her life had just changed forever. The chains were broken, but the real story, her story, was only beginning. The city was cruel to the poor, and no one was poorer than the man who had just freed the girl. His name was Jaren, a man with calloused hands, a tired back, and a heart that refused to turn cold. Jaren lived in a broken hut at the edge of the human quarter, a place where the streets were filled with dust, hunger, and despair. He worked every day carrying stones for alien builders, lifting weights that broke his bones, for a few coins that never lasted. Yet, in all his years of struggle, he had never wasted a single coin. Every coin was food, every coin was survival. So when people saw him spend his very last coin on a slave girl, they thought he had lost his mind. The crowd at the market followed them with mocking laughter. "The fool will starve," they said. "He gave his life away for a burden." Some spat at his feet, Others pointed at the girl, calling her broken and useless, but Jaren never looked back. His grip on the girl's hand was steady, his pace slow but firm. He walked through the jeering crowd as if none of their voices mattered. The girl, still trembling, could not understand. All her life she had been property. Now a man with nothing had bought her with everything he had. Her heart asked a question her lips could not form. Why? When they reached his small hut, Jaren opened the wooden door. Inside was almost nothing. A rough bed, a cracked table, and a small fire pit. This was not a home of comfort, but it was free of chains. He looked at her gently and said, "Sit, you must be tired." The words struck her like lightning. No master had ever cared if she was tired. No one had ever spoken to her as if her pain mattered. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She did not know how to answer kindness. Jaren placed a bowl in front of her. It was only a thin soup, but it was warm. "Eat," he said softly. "This is all I have, but from now on, you will share it with me." The girl's hands shook as she lifted the bowl. The warmth touched her lips. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered in a broken voice, "Why? Why did you spend your last coin for me?" Jaren did not answer right away. He stared into the small fire, his voice heavy but calm. "Because I could not walk away. I saw chains on your wrists, and I saw the fire in your eyes. I could not let that fire die." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken about her eyes. No one had ever seen her as more than a slave. He looked at her again and said, "You are not property. You are human, and a human is worth more than all the coins in the world." The words sank deep into her heart, breaking the walls of fear she had carried for so long. But outside, the city was not blind. Whispers spread like smoke. The fool freed a slave girl. The aliens will punish him. They will both die of hunger. Even some humans mocked him. Why save one when you cannot even save yourself? But Jaren was not afraid. He had lived with nothing before. He could live with nothing again, but he could not live with the shame of leaving a human in chains when he had the power to free her. Days passed, and the girl slowly began to feel the weight of her chains fade. She swept the floor. She cooked with him. She sat by the fire, and little by little, she felt something she had never known before. Dignity. One evening, Jaren came home late, his hands bleeding from work, his face covered with dust. He placed a few coins on the table. The girl looked at the coins, then at him, and whispered, "You worked all day for this." He nodded. "Yes, and tomorrow I will work again." She lowered her eyes, guilt pressing her chest. "You should not have spent your last coin on me." Jaren smiled faintly, though his body was tired. "That was the best coin I ever spent." The words struck her heart like a blade of light, the sound of chains breaking inside her soul. But danger was growing. The alien masters had heard the story of the foolish man and the slave girl. They laughed in their halls, saying, "Humans are forgetting their place. We must remind them." One night, heavy boots echoed in the street outside. Shadows passed by the hut. Alien guards stood whispering, their glowing eyes searching for Jaren's home. Inside, the girl felt her heart freeze. Fear returned. She looked at Jaren, her voice shaking. "They are coming for us." Jaren did not flinch. He placed his hand on hers, steady and strong. "Let them come. I would rather face them with you free than live safe while you are in chains." The girl stared at him, and in that moment, something impossible happened. She believed. She believed she was more than a slave. She believed she was human. And though the world outside laughed, and though the shadows of the aliens drew closer, in her heart she felt a flame rise, a flame that whispered, this was not the end. This was the beginning. The nights in the city were colder than the days. The streets were silent, but danger always moved in the shadows. Jaren knew that freeing the girl had put a mark on his back, yet when he looked at her sitting near the fire, he felt no regret. She was no longer chained, yet she still carried the weight of years of slavery, her eyes always lowered. Her hands trembling whenever footsteps passed outside. She waited for commands that never came. She feared punishment that never arrived. One evening, as the fire cracked softly, Jaren placed a small cup of water in front of her. "Drink," he said, his voice calm, his eyes steady. The girl looked at the cup, then at him, unsure. "Is this for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jaren nodded. "Everything here is for us, not for me alone, not for you alone, but for us." The girl lowered her gaze. Silence filled the room, then she whispered, "I do not even have a name. How can there be an us?" Her words cut through Jaren's heart. He leaned forward, his rough hands resting on his knees. "Then we will give you a name that belongs to you, not to a master, not to chains, but to yourself." Her breath caught in her chest. No one had ever offered her such a gift. After a pause, Jaren said, "I will call you Alara. It means light in the old tongue, and that is what you are. Light. The girl's eyes widened, tears welled, her lips trembled as she whispered the name. Elara. It felt strange, yet powerful, as if the word itself carried strength. She was no longer just a slave, she was Elara. From that day, the air around them changed. Elara still moved carefully, but now she spoke a little more. She asked questions. She smiled at small things. She sat by the fire with Jaren, listening to his quiet stories of life before poverty. But the world outside was not silent. Whispers spread among humans. The fool gave his last coin to free a girl. He even named her. He treats her as if she is equal. Some shook their heads. Others secretly admired him. Among aliens, the story became entertainment. A slave with a name. How ridiculous, they sneered. Let them play house. It will not last. But Jaren was not moved by their laughter. In his heart, he knew what he wanted. One night, as stars blinked above the city, he turned to Elara, his voice soft but steady. I freed you, but freedom is not enough. I do not want you to live beside me as a shadow. I want you to walk beside me as my equal. Elara looked at him, her eyes wide, unsure of his meaning. Equal, she whispered, the word foreign on her tongue. Yes, Jaren said, his gaze never leaving hers. I do not want a slave. I want a partner, Elara. Will you be my wife? The room fell into silence. Her breath quickened. Her heart raced. She had never imagined such words, to go from nameless property to wife. It felt impossible. It felt unreal. I am not worthy, she whispered, her hands shaking. Jaren reached out, taking her trembling hands in his rough, scarred palms. You are worthy because you are human, and because I choose you, not as a master, not as an owner, but as a man choosing a woman. Her tears fell freely. She lowered her head, but when she raised it again, her eyes shone with something new, courage. Yes, she whispered, I will. And so, in the quiet of their small hut, with no crowd, no priest, no riches, Jaren and Elara became husband and wife. No chains, no papers, just a promise between two souls who refused to bow. But news spread quickly. Humans whispered in secret, some smiled, believing it was a sign of hope. Others mocked, saying it was madness. What will the aliens do when they find out, they warned. The aliens, upon hearing the whispers, laughed in their grand halls. A slave as a wife, humans are forgetting their place, one sneered. We will remind them. Elara knew their marriage would not be accepted, but as she looked at Jaren, she felt a strange strength rise inside her. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of being punished. She was afraid of Lowe's. Seeing what she had found one evening as Jaren returned from work with dust covering his face, he found Elara waiting at the door, her posture tall, her eyes firm. I am not your burden, she said quietly. I am your wife. I will stand beside you, whatever comes. Jaren smiled, his heart swelling with pride. Then let them come, he said, his voice steady. We will face them together. And outside, as shadows grew long and whispers turned into threats, the bond between them only grew stronger. No longer a master and a slave, no longer a fool and a burden, but a husband and a wife. The city laughed, the aliens mocked, but neither laughter nor mockery could shake the truth that now bound them. A man with nothing had given his last coin, and a woman with nothing had given her heart. Together they had created something the Empire could not control. Love. But love was dangerous in a world ruled by cruelty. And soon, their quiet union would draw the attention of powers greater than they imagined. The city slept under the eyes of its alien rulers, their towers shining like black blades against the night sky, streets filled with silence. But silence that was not peace, it was the silence of fear. Jaren and Elara lived in their small hut at the edge of the human quarter. Though poor and surrounded by threats, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Jaren came home with bruises from work. Elara waited with food and healing hands. Together they laughed softly in the dark, whispering like conspirators against the cruel world. But whispers had a way of traveling. Their marriage had become a story, and stories had power. Some humans mocked, but others secretly found courage in it. If one woman could rise from slave to wife, maybe there was more waiting for them. One evening, as the fire burned low, Elara noticed a shadow at the door. Her body tensed, her hands grip Ped the edge of the table, Jaren stood slowly, ready for danger, but instead of an alien guard, a man stepped in, his eyes sharp, his face hidden under a hood. Jaren, the man whispered, we need to talk. Jaren's body relaxed only slightly. He knew the voice. It was Darek, a stoneworker like himself, but also something more. Darek was part of a secret group, a group that dreamed of freedom. Elara's eyes widened. She listened as Darek's words cut through the silence. The aliens know about you. They mock you in their halls. They laugh at your wife, but some of us do not laugh. Some of us see a sign. Jaren frowned. A sign. Yes. Darek leaned closer, his voice urgent. You spent your last coin for a slave, and you made her your wife. Do you not see what that means? It means you defied their chains. It means humans are still human. Alara felt her heart race. Her past told her to stay silent, but her new life gave her courage. And what do you want from us? She asked softly. Darek turned to her, his eyes narrowing as if testing her strength. We want you to join us, the Freedom Circle. We hide in tunnels. We plan in silence. We wait for the day humans rise. The fire cracked, shadows danced across the walls. Jaren looked at Alara, his jaw tight. He had kept this secret from her, not to protect himself, but to protect her. You are one of them, she whispered, shock and awe mixing in her voice. Jaren nodded slowly. Yes, I am. I was long before I freed you, but I never wanted to pull you into danger. Alara stood, her hands trembling but her eyes firm. Danger has followed me since birth. I was born in chains. I lived in chains. If danger is the price of freedom, then I will pay it. Her words filled the small hut with fire. Darek stared at her, then nodded with respect. The slave girl is no more. I see now why Jaren chose you. That night, Alara learned the truth. Jaren was not just a poor man. He was a fighter in silence, carrying stones for aliens by day, but carrying messages for rebels by night. His Rugu hands not only built alien towers, they also dug tunnels for the circle. Alara listened, her anger boiling as Jaren told her of humans tortured for speaking too loud, of children taken to alien camps, of men crushed under endless labor. The memories of her own chains rose like fire in her chest. I will not hide, she said, her voice steady. Teach me. Let me fight. Jaren hesitated, but when he looked into her eyes, he saw the same fire he had seen in the market that day, the fire that made him spend his last coin. He nodded. Then you will fight. Days turned into weeks, and Alara changed. She learned to move in silence, to read secret marks on walls, to pass coded words in crowded streets. Darek and others showed her how to handle a blade, how to watch the shadows, how to never let fear show in her eyes. The more she learned, the less she was the frightened girl in chains, and the more she became Alara, the wife, the fighter, the symbol. But symbols were dangerous. The aliens began to hear more whispers. The slave wife walks free. The slave wife carries fire. Their laughter turned to suspicion, and suspicion turned to orders. One night, heavy boots thundered in the street, torches lit the dark, alien guards surrounded their quarter, voices shouted, "Bring them out, the fool and his slave wife!" Inside the hut, Alara stood frozen, her heart pounded, but then she remembered her own words. I will not hide. She gripped Jaren's hand, her voice steady, though her body shook. If they take us, let them see we are not afraid. Jaren nodded, his face calm, though his eyes burned. Together they stepped into the night. The aliens laughed when they saw them, mocking as always, a slave wife and her fool husband. But their laughter carried a hint of unease because behind the laughter, behind the mockery, they saw something new in the woman's eyes. Not fear, the fire. And as the guards dragged them away toward the alien court, the humans watching from the shadows whispered, not with mockery, but with awe. The slave wife does not bow. The Empire thought it was about to punish a fool and his broken woman, but in truth, it was about to create a symbol, a shadow of rebellion that would one day set the city aflame. The alien court was a place of fear, a massive hall carved from black stone, lit by burning crystals that glowed like blood. High above, alien lords sat on thrones of iron, their eyes glowing red, their voices like thunder. Jaren and Alara were dragged inside by guards, chains locked around their wrists once more, but this time, Alara felt no shame, no weight. She walked with her head high, her eyes steady. The hall was filled with watchers, humans crowded in the back, forced to kneel, aliens filling the front rows, laughing and jeering. The lords wanted a spectacle. They wanted to show every human what happens when one dares to rise. The alien master who once owned Alara stood proudly, his deep voice booming. This was my slave, a weak, useless thing. I sold her for a coin, and now she dares to stand as wife to this fool. A crime against order, a crime against the Empire. The crowd roared with laughter, their voices echoing against the walls, but Alara did not lower her eyes. She looked straight at her former master, her voice cutting through the noise. I was your slave, yes, but now I am a wife, and no chain will ever bind me again. The hall grew silent for a breath, then burst into louder laughter. Alien lords shook their heads. Look how bold the slave wife has become. Perhaps we should teach her silence again, one hissed. Jaren's jaw tightened. He stepped forward despite the chains, his voice steady. She is not a slave. She is human, and so am I. You fear us because you know that one day humans will rise. The lords snarled, their anger rising. One struck the stone with his staff, sparks flying. Silence! You dare speak of rebellion here. You dare challenge the empire. But the words were already spreading. Humans in the back whispered to each other, eyes wide. For the first time, they had seen one of their own speak boldly in the alien court. For the first time, they saw courage instead of fear. The lead judge leaned forward, his voice cold and sharp. You will be punished. The fool will be broken. The slave wife will be returned to her place, and your love will be erased. Alara's heart pounded. Fear tried to crawl back into her chest, but she clenched her fists. She remembered Jaren's words. You are human. And she raised her voice so all could hear. You can break my body, but you cannot erase my soul. I was a slave, but I will never bow again. The words fell like fire into the crowd. Silence followed. Even the aliens paused, for no human had spoken such defiance in years. One lord hissed with rage, "Then you will burn for your words." The guards dragged Jaren and Alara toward the platform of judgment, heavy chains clinking. Alien lords prepared to deliver their sentence, but something stirred in the crowd. Humans lifted their heads, whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs turned to voices. She does not bow, one whispered. She speaks, another said, and slowly the words spread like sparks. The aliens saw it, their eyes narrowing. They realized the trial was becoming dangerous. What was meant to humiliate was turning into inspiration. The judge raised his staff to silence the room. The punishment will be death, he declared, his voice cold as stone. Gasps filled the hall. Jaren tightened his grip on Alara's hand, ready to face the end, but Alara stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Then let every human see this. You fear a woman who was once a slave. You fear a man with no wealth. If you must kill us, then kill us as husband and wife, not as master and slave. Her words struck like a blade. Humans in the crowd lifted their heads higher, their chains rattling as they shifted. Even under the weight of fear, hope flickered in their eyes. The judge slammed his staff again, furious. Enough! Take them away, he roared. But in that moment, a loud crash shook the hall. One of the side walls burst open, smoke filled the chamber, and from the shadows, figures rushed in, masked and armed. It was the Freedom Circle. Chaos exploded. Guards drew their weapons. Humans shouted. Aliens screamed. Blades clashed. Fire spread across the hall. Jaren pulled Alara close, whispering, "Stay with me." As Darik's voice rose above the chaos. The time has come, humans, rise. Alara's heart thundered. She looked around at the chaos, and instead of fear, she felt fire. She saw humans fighting back. She saw aliens stumbling in shock. She saw a chance. She grabbed a fallen weapon, her hands shaking only for a moment, then steady. She turned to Jaren, her eyes blazing. "I will not hide," she said. And in the firelit chaos of the alien court, the slave wife raised her blade, her voice echoing, "For freedom." The trial of fire had begun. Not an end, but a spark. A spark that would soon spread beyond the black walls of the empire. The alien court burned that night, smoke rising into the sky. Humans scattered in chaos, some fleeing, some fighting. The Freedom Circle pulled Jaren and Alara through the broken wall, their chains cut, their lungs filled with ash and fire. Outside, the city trembled with fear and whispers. News spread faster than fire. The slave wife stood against the lords. The fool defied the court. The story ran through every alley, every dark corner, carried by human lips that had been silent too long. In the tunnels beneath the city, Jaren and Alara were hidden. The Freedom Circle had secret chambers lit by stolen lamps, walls carved with messages of hope, men and women training with weapons made from scraps, planning in silence, dreaming in fire. Alara sat against the stone wall, her chest rising and falling, her wrists still raw from chains, but her eyes sharper than ever. She was no longer the trembling girl of the market. She was the woman who had spoken in the alien court, the woman who refused to bow. Darik stood before her, his voice hard but respectful. "You have become a symbol, Alara. The people whisper your name. They call you the slave wife, but not with mockery, with hope." Alara lowered her gaze, her voice quiet. "I am no leader. I am just a woman who wanted freedom." Darik shook his head. "That is why you are dangerous to them, not because of weapons, but because of what you represent. You remind humans that chains can break." Jaren placed his hand on hers, steady and warm. "Alara, they need you. I need you. This is no longer only our fight. It is the fight of every human in this city." Alara's heart pounded. Fear and fire battled inside her. But when she remembered the faces of humans kneeling in the court, their heads lifting at her words, she knew Darek was right. From that day, Alara began her training, not only in silence and shadows, but in strength. She held a blade until her arms ached. She learned to fight with speed rather than force. She practiced until her hands bled. She trained not to kill, but to lead, to show others that even a woman who was once chained could stand tall. The Freedom Circle grew bolder, stealing food from alien stores, burning records of slavery, freeing children from camps, and everywhere they went, humans whispered Alara's name. In the streets, slaves worked with heads lowered, but when they heard her story, they lifted their eyes for a moment, and that moment was enough. The aliens noticed, their laughter turned to warnings, their warnings turned to fear. They sent guards into the tunnels, they burned homes in the human quarter, but the more they tried to silence the whispers, the louder the whispers became. One evening, Alara stood before a gathering of humans in the tunnels, men and women who had lost everything, children who had never known freedom, elders who carried scars from decades of chains. Her voice shook at first, but then grew steady. "I was born in chains," she said. "I lived in chains. I was beaten, mocked, and called property. But one man spent his last coin to show me I was human, and now I tell you the same. You are human, and no chain can change that. No whip, no master, no alien lord." Tears filled the eyes of those listening, their heads lifted higher, their backs straighter, hope sparked in their hearts. Darek leaned close to Jaren, whispering, "She is more dangerous than any blade. Her words are fire." And fire indeed began to spread. Small rebellions broke out, slaves refusing to bow, workers slowing their labor, guards finding graffiti on walls, 3 words written again and again. The slave wife. The aliens struck back harder, patrols doubled, punishments grew crueler, but still the whispers lived, because whispers could not be chained. Jaren stood beside Alara every step, his strength steady even as his body weakened from endless labor and fights. He smiled at her one night saying, "I gave my coin to free you, but you are the one freeing us all." Her heart ached with love and fear of losing him, fear of failing, but she hid it behind fire. She could not let the people see her weakness. One night, as the Freedom Circle planned their next strike, news arrived that the aliens were preparing a grand spectacle, a public punishment in the central square. They would capture rebels and burn them alive, a warning to all humans. Darek slammed his fist against the stone. "They want to kill our spirit once and for all." Alara's eyes burned, her voice calm but sharp. "Then we must show them our spirit cannot die. If they light a fire in the square, we will turn it into our flame." The plan was dangerous, almost impossible. But the circle agreed. Humans would gather. They would fight not only in shadows but in open sight. As the night of the spectacle drew near, the city trembled. Humans whispered louder. Aliens watched with unease. The air itself seemed to wait. And in the tunnels, Alara stood ready, her blade at her side, her heart heavy but strong. Jaren at her back, Darek at her side, her voice steady as she spoke to the fighters. "Tonight, they will try to burn us. But tonight, we will rise like fire, not as slaves, not as shadows, but as humans." The crowd roared in whispers, their chains rattling not as weakness, but as warning. And in that moment, Alara was no longer only the slave wife. She was the rising flame, the spark of rebellion that could no longer be hidden. The night was heavy with silence. Torches burned in the central square. Shadows of alien guards stood tall, their weapons gleaming like steel fangs. A wooden platform was built in the middle, and on it, cages filled with captured humans, trembling but unbroken. The alien lords gathered above, sitting on stone thrones, their voices echoing like thunder. "Tonight, humans will remember their place," one declared. "Tonight, fear will kill their foolish dreams." But the lords did not know, deep below the city, the Freedom Circle was ready, blades sharpened, plans whispered, hearts burning. And at the center of it all stood Alara, once a nameless slave, now a woman with fire in her eyes. Jaren tightened his grip on her hand, his body worn from endless battles, his face pale with hidden pain, but his voice calm. "Stay strong, Alara. Tonight is bigger than us." She nodded, though her heart ached. She saw the wound on his side that he tried to hide, blood seeping slowly through his shirt. But she said nothing, because she knew if he could still stand, he would fight beside her until the very end. The signal came with the sound of a bell. The aliens raised their staffs, ready to burn the cages, ready to crush human hope once and for all. But before the flames could rise, a voice cut through the night, strong and clear. "No more." All eyes turned, and there she was, Alara, stepping into the square with fire in her hands and fire in her voice, her cloak thrown aside, her blade shining, her hair wild in the wind. "The slave wife," an alien spat. but his voice carried unease. Alara's voice rose higher, louder than the crowd. I was born in chains, I lived in chains, but I will not die in chains, and neither will you, she cried, turning her eyes to the caged humans. The crowd gasped, whispers spread like waves. The slave wife, Alara, she has come. The aliens roared with laughter. Kill her, one commanded. Guards rushed forward, weapons raised, but before they could strike, shadows moved. The freedom circle burst into the square, blades flashing, torches falling, chaos spreading. Jaren fought with all his strength, his blade cutting through chains, freeing the captives. Darek led fighters into the alien ranks, shouts and steel clashing. And Alara, with every swing of her weapon, burned her fear away. She was no longer the broken girl who once bowed her head. She was the rising flame, leading humans in open rebellion. The battle raged through the night. Humans shouted, their chains used as weapons, stones thrown, fire spreading. The square turned into a storm of smoke and cries. Alara climbed the platform, raising her blade high, her voice carrying through the chaos. Look at them, she shouted to the humans. They fear us. They laugh because they are afraid. They beat us because they are afraid. But tonight, they will know we are not slaves. We are humans. The cages burst open, prisoners freed, their chains falling like thunder on the stone ground. But in the middle of the fight, Alara saw Jaren stumble, his face pale, his wound bleeding heavier. Her heart stopped. She rushed to him, catching him before he fell. He smiled weakly, his voice faint. Do not stop, Alara. Do not let him win. Her tears burned, but she pressed her forehead to his, whispering, You gave your last coin for me. I will give everything for us. She rose, fury and love blazing inside her, lifting her blade once more, her voice a storm. For Jaren, for freedom. Humans roared with her, their voices breaking the night. Even the alien lords leaned back in fear, for they saw something no chain could hold. The guards fell one by one. The lords fled into their towers. And though the battle was not a full victory, the humans had won something greater than ground. They had won belief. By dawn, the square was broken, fires still burning, bodies scattered, but humans stood tall, their chains shattered, their voices unbowed. Alara knelt beside Jaren, his breathing weak but steady, his hand in hers. He whispered softly, I gave my coin to free you, but you gave the world back to us. Tears fell down her cheeks, but her heart was steady. She kissed his hand and whispered back, You gave me love. I will carry your flame until the stars burn out. And so, in the ruins of the alien square, humans gathered around her, their voices low but filled with awe. Alara, they said, the slave wife, the flame of freedom. From that day, her story spread across the galaxy, not as a tale of a slave, not as a tale of a fool, but as the legend of a wife who became a warrior, a woman who turned her chains into fire. And though the war was far from over, one truth could no longer be silenced. A coin had bought freedom, love had built courage, and courage had created a legend. She was no longer just a slave, no longer just a wife. She was Alara, a warrior, a flame, a legend.